Bitcoin has just closed its highest monthly candle close in history, closing above $105,000 for the month of May. This comes off the back of massive fears by economists and mainstream media that there was going to be a recession, calls that tariffs were going to cause a massive economic decline in the US, and this was going to spill into risk assets. Bitcoin has shown huge strength since the April the 7th dump to 74k. And in this video, we're going to talk about Doge and Elon leaving the Doge committee and how that is very bullish for Bitcoin long term. Now, just last week, we got news that Elon Musk was leaving the federal government. He was leaving the Doge committee and he was going back to Tesla and SpaceX. And as you can imagine, the mainstream media had a field day. The left wing is celebrating. They're jumping up for joy because Elon is now leaving. They've accused him of all sorts. They've trashed his company. Tesla got absolutely destroyed in the press, with people even protesting outside Tesla factories. All because he wanted to cut wasteful government spending. Think of that. Think of the madness. People protesting that someone actually wants to cut the fact that the government is wasting your hard-earned tax money. But for many not paying attention, this report came out a few months ago stating that Elon Musk was actually designated a special government employee, which meant that if he stayed too long in the job, he would have to disclose his public finances and any conflicts of interest, and could actually be forced to sell stock in companies that benefit from government subsidies. Now, obviously, we know SpaceX is a massive winner from government contracts. SpaceX receives massive government funding because it now basically provides rockets for NASA, because NASA are too inefficient and unable to launch their own rockets. So this end for Elon Musk was likely all along, and the 130-day period just happens to coincide with this week when Elon is due to leave. So, in my opinion, it was always planned that he would leave at this point. But nevertheless, the left-wing media are going wild. Just look at these headlines. Elon Musk leaves a mess for Trump. So long, Elon, the cuts didn't go to plan. Elon Musk's reign of corruption is just chaos. The left-wing media love the fact that Elon never achieved his goal of cutting $1 trillion in the first year in the White House. The media is calling Elon Musk's Doge committee a failure. They're saying he never achieved $1 trillion in cuts and he's leaving with a trail of destruction. It seems him and Trump may actually have some disagreements on government spending, which seems to be coming out this week. But if we actually look at what Doge achieved, they estimated to save over $180 billion. Remember, that's since January. So in just 5 months, they have achieved $180 billion in savings, over $1,100 per taxpayer. So whether he achieved $1 trillion or not, this is a massive achievement in my opinion. A government wasting this much money that can be uncovered and unwound in 5 months should be celebrated. But no, the left-wing media is having a field day, and Elon now coming out against Trump's big beautiful bill is just feeding the flames. You see, Trump got elected because he said he was going to cut the waste. He was going to enter the swamp and he was going to drain it. He was going to get rid of all the wasteful government spending and reduce the deficit, which currently sits at over $2 trillion. He believed he could cut a lot of wasteful spending, grow GDP and reduce that deficit, which ultimately we know leads to money printing and massive interest expense every single year. So while $180 billion isn't $1 trillion, it is a start, and it does show that there's massive efficiencies to be made in Washington. The US government debt currently sits at over $36 trillion, and loads of people are talking about it, with the interest expense now over $100 billion per month. And as you can see, David Summers even says that that interest expense is only increasing month on month, now almost $1.2 trillion per year. And with yields so high, this is only going to get worse as the debt continues to stay stubbornly high. And as Pomp says, nothing stops this train. What is coming is massive money print, and even Elon Musk, one of the top entrepreneurs of our generation, could not stop government spending. What's hilarious about the left-wing outrage against Elon Musk and the hatred for him and the hatred for what he's doing is because they all benefit from this wasteful spending. All these left-wing Democrats get kickbacks from all these companies that benefit from the inefficiency of the government. Trying to change that was always going to be an uphill battle. But what's hilarious is the left wing paint Elon Musk as some right wing nut job. But actually, all he's trying to do is bring business efficiency to the government. And actually, if we go back in time, Elon was actually a massive supporter of Hillary Clinton back in the day. He was one of the biggest fundraisers for the Democrats. So it's just hilarious to watch the left-wing media have absolute outrage at what he was trying to achieve with Doge. But then this week, Elon weighed in and he actually came out and took a stance against the big beautiful bill. He says, "I'm sorry, I just can't stand it anymore. The massive, outrageous, pork-filled congressional spending bill is a disgusting abomination. Shame on those who voted for it. You know you did wrong." And the reason is, the government's debt is going to explode much higher over the next 5 years. Trump, while being elected to drain the swamp and cut the deficit, is now pushing through a spending bill that's going to cost the taxpayer even more money. So why is all this bullish for Bitcoin and crypto? What's interesting right now is politicians are saying the quiet bit out loud. Normally the saying is watch what they do, not what they say, because they normally try and cover up what they're actually going to do. Right now, politicians are saying exactly what they plan to do, and they plan to inflate the debt away. They plan to print trillions of dollars and have GDP growth go through the absolute roof. GDP is going to explode much higher, and it's all going to be fueled by money printing and deregulation. As you can see here, he tweeted last week after being on Fox News saying that they can both grow the economy and control the debt. He said what is important is that the economy grows faster than the debt. Well, currently the debt is exploding higher at over 6% per year. That means Scott Bessent has to facilitate a way to get GDP growth over 6% per year. And there's only one way to do that, and that is money printing and inflation. Now, one of the issues with all this inflation is bondholders. Bondholders are going to get absolutely wrecked over the next 5 years. And the reason for that is because they're going to get paid back an interest rate which is less than inflation. Even the 10-year today, which is at scary high levels at 4.5%, well, if they say they're going to grow their way faster than 6% of debt, that means inflation in real terms is actually going to be about 6% to achieve GDP growth of 6%. That means if you're earning 4.5% yield on a debt obligation, then you are losing money. And Scott Bessent knows it. That's why he's came out and made these bold statements that the US will never default on its debt. And basically what he's saying is they'll never not pay the returns. So if they owe you money, you will always get paid back. What he's not saying is that you'll get paid back in a currency that has been massively devalued because of money printing. And this bit's really important. The bond market controls everything. And you can see that Scott Bessent has had to step in and buy $10 billion worth of bonds to try and calm yields. He's trying to fight against rising yields, and the reason yields are rising is because bond investors want a return on their investment. They want to beat inflation. If they're not beating inflation, they're going backwards, and they're demanding higher yields. The only way to bring down yields is buyers. They need more buyers of government debt, and that's why the Treasury has stepped in and buys $10 billion worth of bonds to try and calm the yields. On top of this, Scott Bessent has said later this summer we will see the SLR, that's the supplementary leverage ratio, be changed for banks. And that basically means banks can buy more and more treasuries and it won't hurt their over-collateralization. That means that banks can hold as many treasuries as they want and it won't count against them when they drop in value. He is basically manipulating everybody and anyone to buy US treasuries. That's why the stablecoin legislation is so bullish for crypto, because they need buyers. Foreign investors are no longer buying US treasuries. China, Japan, they've slowed their pace of buying, and with tariffs, they'll actually buy a lot less going forward. So what Scott Bessent and Trump are trying to do is basically drive as much buy demand to the bond market via the Treasury buying its own bonds, via the SLR changing so banks can buy more, and through stablecoin issuers who will be forced to hold government debt. Okay, so let's jump back over to Bitcoin and let's talk about why all of this wraps up and makes it immensely bullish for Bitcoin. Let's start with Doge and Elon Musk. So basically what was trying to happen, Elon Musk was trying to reduce federal government spending reduce the deficit so that the government had to borrow less per year in order to function. They wanted to borrow less money, which meant less money printing, and that would reduce the inflationary pressures on the everyday American. At the same time, that would also reduce government spending, and money would flow back into the private sector, benefiting the average American. Now, for me, this was incredibly bullish for the US economy. It was incredibly bullish for the global economy, and it basically meant the government was going to operate in a more responsible manner. However, Bitcoin tracks global liquidity. Bitcoin loves liquidity. It loves money printing. It flies when money printing is on the horizon, and we can see those moves over the last few years. What became quite clear early on with Doge is that Elon wasn't going to have it all his own way. He had senators, congressmen, congresswomen, he had the media all campaigning against his cuts because they're all on the take. They're all benefiting from massive inefficiency in the government. There's an interview out this week with someone from Doge, and he couldn't believe what he inherited when he went into Doge. He was a software engineer, and in order to get anything approved, he had to go through millions of checks and millions of politicians who didn't want improvements to be made because they all benefit from it. So in reality, if Doge was successful and it cut $1 trillion, that would lead to less money printing, less inflation, and that would actually probably be negative for Bitcoin in the short term. So with Doge failing, Elon Musk going back to Tesla and SpaceX, that's actually really bullish for Bitcoin because what it means is the cuts are going to have less of an impact, and the big beautiful spending bill, which Elon is massively against, is actually hugely inflationary. It's going to lead to massive government spending, it's going to lead to massive money printing, and we're going to see US debt skyrocket over the next 5 years, with us expected to reach $40 trillion worth of debt by 2030. In my opinion, we blast past that. There's more chance of us being closer to 50 trillion by 2030 than 40 trillion. And let's go back to this quote by Lynn Alden that's quoted by Pomp. Nothing stops this train. The train is debt. The train is money printing, and the train is QE. The bond market is telling the government they don't agree with these spending bills. The bond market is telling the world that there's going to be massive inflation over the next few years, and they want compensated for it. So while Doge never happened, Scott Bessent's reaction and the reaction to the trade wars is just showing that money printing is coming. It's going to come in QE, it's going to come in rate cuts, we're going to see stealth QE like what's going on right now with Treasury buybacks, and Scott Bessent is going to create as many buyers through banks and stablecoins of US Treasuries as possible. The lower the yield, the more government debt that's going to get issued, and it's just a vicious cycle. We are going to see trillions of dollars of liquidity poured into the markets over the coming years, and a big part of that is because Doge wasn't effective, because they couldn't get the deficit down. And for me, this is why Bitcoin continues to show massive strength, even though we're going into the summer months. Retail investors, crypto Twitter, any average crypto investor has worked out one law of the universe, and that is long term, the Fed's going to print, central banks around the world are going to print money and debase their currency. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when, and that's why they continue to buy the dip, because it doesn't matter. A Bitcoin investor, a crypto investor, doesn't have quarterly or monthly earnings to worry about. All they have to worry about is the long term, and the long term is Bitcoin goes much, much higher because global liquidity is going to increase because of central bank money printing. We saw Wall Street completely freak out about tariffs, about trade war, about recession, and on the April the 7th, they got caught offside. Retailers bought over 30% of the dip. They were a third of the buyers. Why? Because they've worked out this cheat code that long term it doesn't matter because all risk assets, but in particular Bitcoin, are going much, much higher because central banks are going to keep inflating the currency. So for me, Doge failing, Scott Bessent on CNBC and Fox News talking about never defaulting on the debt, it's all linked. It all ties up with the fact that the government is going to print money, it's going to spend way more than it receives in tax receipts, and that's why Elon left almost in a huff, because he couldn't cut what he wanted to cut, because the bond market was going mad, mainstream media was going mad, and it's crazy to think we live in a world where cutting and being efficient as a government is frowned upon. We said a few weeks ago we expected an all-time high in Bitcoin. We've just got the all-time high monthly candle close in May. And for me, I'm expecting much, much higher. I think we'll see another new all-time high in June. and we could be on for a very bullish 90-day period. The outlook for the end of the year, in my opinion, is still a bit grey and fuzzy, but we will release a video on what I think is going to happen towards the end of the year very soon. For now, Bitcoin's going higher. Stay patient, altcoins will follow very soon. And that is all for this video. Thank you very much for tuning in. We'll be back very soon.